sorry that this was a little bit late. I originally said I was going to do it at 9 a.m., but our neighbors were like doing their lawn. There's like some construction happening behind my house, so I kind of wanted to wait until we were able to do this and not be interrupted by a lot of extraneous noise. So welcome to my second part of my 3-part training. Today we are talking about 3 secrets for deconditioning your limiting beliefs. If you have not watched part 1, which is speeding up your manifestations, it's in my IG lives, the recording, so definitely go and watch that one first. If you're gonna go through the whole series, it just makes it make a lot more sense. Of course, you can just watch this one on its own, but each training is going to build on each other. So if you really want to get like the full experience, I want you to like start from the beginning and work your way through, of course. So obviously now if you've watched that first training, you know that the secret to working with your subconscious is really the key to turning your pain into profit, transforming your mindset, like really deconditioning those limiting beliefs so that you can really like own your authentic self. Like you can come back to the most empowered, confident version of yourself. And like when we look at the way the world is going, like I don't know about you, but right now in Australia, like we're going through a lot in terms of the whole situation, and there's just a lot of people that are like stuck in fear, they're stuck in an anxiety, they're feeling like they have no options, they're like in a situation where they're really insecure around what's going on. And the thing is about this is like, of course, I want to have compassion for everyone in their situation. Like, this is not intended to shame anyone. But the thing is when you heal yourself and you create that sense of safety and security within yourself, then that's when you're able to create that confidence and security in your outer environment, because our outer world is always just a reflection of like what's going on the inside. And more than ever, there's like things coming up right now that are going to trigger you, that are going to challenge your beliefs about safety and security and what that means for you. And while you can't really, you can argue that you can't affect what's going on in the world out there, you can affect how you feel, you can affect how you show up, you can affect how you react when you get triggered. And that is the moment where you're able to take your power back. Like that's the moment where you're able to really like empower yourself to like live your life confidently as yourself and like make decisions from like a really aligned place. And that's what I want for you. Like that is always my intention behind doing this work. Like, yes, it's amazing to like manifest everything that you want in life, like your business goals, like all the things, but really at the core of this work, it's like to heal your inner being. It's to heal your inner child. It's to heal like your inner world, because when you do that, everything around you is going to change to match your frequency that you're putting out in terms of that. So today we're going to walk through 3 secrets to deconditioning your limiting beliefs, empowering your mindset for manifestation, and we're going to do like a little 30-second trick, or it's not a trick, but it's like a 30-second like test that you can do to see if like your next planned action step is the right one for you. Because of course we talk about like matching your frequency, like deconditioning those limiting beliefs, but at the core root of manifestation is like at some point you're gonna have to take action, but the action that's right for you is gonna be like the aligned action that is like the one for you, and no one else can tell you what that is. So with this little 30-second test that I'm going to give you, you're gonna really be able to get like straight away feedback of like the move that you're planning to make next. Is it the right one for you or is it not? So 3 secrets to deconditioning your limiting beliefs. Number 1 is transforming your self-worth. This is the biggest thing. Like self-worth is the law of attraction in action. Like if you don't feel worthy of having something, you will never attract it. And so that's why it's like you could go around like reprogramming all these other beliefs that you have, but if on a deep level you don't feel worthy of having what you want, then it's not going to happen. So if you find yourself like doubting whether your goals are coming, or you're like losing hope, or you have a really hard time like staying positive and trusting that your manifestation is going to come, it's because you don't feel worthy of of having it. Because if you truly felt worthy of having your goal, then you would be like, of course it's going to show up. Like, yeah, I'm going to have to do some things. Maybe I'm going to have to like really like check in with my mindset, or like how I'm showing up, or I'm going to have to find the right mentor. But I trust that it's going to happen for me. Like, I don't have doubt around that area. Like, I'm not wobbly around like being like, oh, maybe I'm not the kind of person that has this sort of thing. Or one thing that I notice with clients that's really interesting is like they'll set this goal for themselves, and then they'll like achieve it, and then they'll kind of like wobble in that moment because they're like, oh my god, this feels super weird. Like, it feels really unsafe to have this level of success. It feels unsafe to have this manifestation, this partner, like whatever it is. And then they'll manifest it out really quickly because they don't have the level of self-worth to hold on to that thing. So that's why anytime you want to up level what you're experiencing in your environment, you have to first check in and be like, do I feel worthy of having that thing that I say that I want? And like, I see so many people go, like, wanting to create businesses. Like, specifically, I see a lot of like coaches and healers doing this, and I think it's amazing that you want to be a coach. I think it's amazing that you want to be a healer. I think it's so needed. But I see these people doing this, and then they're like, oh, but I don't believe in myself, or like, who would buy for me, or I don't know what the transformation that I provide is. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. But if you don't believe in yourself, then how do you expect those clients to invest with you? Like, how are you going to speak from a place of authority? How are you going to show those people that you can help them if you can't help or believe in yourself? And this really comes down to believing that you're worthy of it, because when you know that you're worthy, and you know that, like, I think sometimes we come at it from this perspective of like, oh, well, I don't know how I can help everyone out there. But the thing is, especially as a coach, it's like, you don't need to help everyone out there. You just need to help the person who's like one step behind you. And like, at one point you were that person, and you wanted to know the things that you know now. And I can tell you this all that, like, I could talk until I'm blue in the face about this. But the thing is if you don't feel worthy of having it, you're not going to like do the things that you need to do, which is where it comes back to taking action. Because when you feel deeply worthy of having something, it's really easy for you to like show up and like hop on Instagram, like start a website, whatever those things are that you need to do, like that will be really easy for you. So I think sometimes when we hear people say a lot like, oh, you have to heal your self-worth, you have to up-level your self-worth, and then you kind of like begs the question, it's like, well, where does your self-worth come from? And this is like one of my favorite things to get into, because your subconscious mind is programmed primarily between the ages of 0 to 7. And as I know from like studying my psychology degree, it's like we go through these developmental stages as children, and in that stage, you can't like be in a different stage, because I think a lot of the time when we're adults, we look back on like what we believed as children, and you're like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, why would you believe that? But when you go back to that developmental stage, you understand that like your mind can't work in any other way. So like, if we know that like your subconscious is being programmed from 0 to 7 years old, and if we look at kids who are especially like in that 1 to 3 year old range, then it's like those, when you're 1 to 3 years old, you don't understand that like other people might have feelings that are different from you. You think that the way that you feel is how everyone else feels as well. You only see things from your perspective, and it's like you are kind of primarily looking for like a secure base to attach to, like your primary caregiver, so that you can go out and explore the world. And if that primary caregiver doesn't feel safe to you, you create the story for yourself that it's like you're not doing good enough. It's because like you're bad that they reacted in this way. And as an adult, you can rationalize it and be like, well, like, it's hard work being a mom or a dad, and like, of course you're going to run out of patience at some point, and you're probably going to react in a way that doesn't feel great. But then like that child internalizes the story of being like, oh, well, that must mean that I did something wrong. It means that I'm bad. It means that I'm not good enough, because it feels safer for us to believe that we're the person who's wrong than it is to believe that like our caregiver like isn't able to adequately take care of us. And I know that like when I say this kind of stuff, sometimes it brings up a lot of triggers for people, because they're like, well, like, I'm not a bad mom, or like you can't criticize parents in this way or whatever. And it's like, it's not done with the intention to criticize you or your parenting skills. I'm like just trying to explain this from a perspective of like, these are like the psychological developmental stages that we go through. And especially in that 0 to 7 years old, where you're basically in a hypnotic brain state all the time. When I tell people I do hypnotherapy, people are like, oh, like, they don't know what it means. And I'm like, the thing is like, you're always going in and out of hypnosis all the time. It's like when you've been watching the TV for a while and you're kind of zoning out, you're in a hypnotic brain state. It's not something that's weird to us. It's like the most natural thing for us to go into hypnosis all the time. And the thing about hypnosis is basically it's just like your conscious mind is sort of like taking a break. Your subconscious takes over. You're generally very relaxed, and you're also very suggestible. Like, this is why advertising works, because it's speaking to your subconscious mind. But we don't really realize it because our conscious mind isn't present. It isn't paying attention. So how this relates back to you being 0 to 7 years old, you're in that hypnotic brain state. That whole 7 years, your rational thought isn't formed. Your ability to like be logical, your ability to like see the other side of things, it doesn't exist. And this is when your beliefs start getting formed. Like, this is when your mind is essentially programmed. I always tell people like doing RTT is like having like a software upgrade for your brain. It's like that computer programming that you've set in from the ages of 0 to 7. As you go through life, you just build on those beliefs that you already created. But whatever stories you created about yourself is what you'll kind of build on. And if the story that you've created about yourself is like, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, like I'm unlovable. And most of us go around with these stories in our life because in some way maybe we didn't get a need met and we created this huge story out of it. And I always tell my clients, it's not like what happened to you, it's the meaning that you created out of those events. And so when I work with my clients around self-worth, I'm like, okay, like where did this start? And oftentimes they'll go back to being like really young, and they'll be like, oh, like my parents left me in the high chair, everyone else is off doing something else, I feel really alone. And I'm like, okay, well, like if you feel alone, what does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, it means that they've abandoned me, it means that I'm not enough. And it sounds so dramatic, especially as an adult, and you're looking back and you're like, that's ridiculous, your parents are just in the other room, like this is such a normal thing that happens. But to that child, it's such a big thing. And then that's the story that encodes within you, and that like creates your sense of self-worth. And I always want to say to people, it's like, if you're a parent, or like this triggers you hearing it because you're a parent, like have compassion for yourself, because it's like, that's just how your child's brain works. We're not trying to say that you're doing a bad job parenting. We're not trying to say that you're not a good parent. It's just like, that's how that child's brain works. And I would go out on a limb and say that like the needs that we have as children, it would be impossible for any parent to fully meet those needs all of the time, because there's just too much stuff happening all the time. It's impossible to be perfect. Nobody is like, you can't do it. And so like the children go around creating these stories, and then that creates your self-worth as an adult. And I know from like working with a lot of my clients that it's like they maybe grew up in situations where they weren't getting their needs met. And even if you grew up in like a quote unquote like happy household, there's always going to be something that happened where as a child you interpreted it that like your needs weren't getting met, and then you created this story that I'm not good enough. Because this is like the biggest, like I would say like crisis of humanity, is most people don't believe they're good enough. This is what holds us back from absolutely everything. It's like what holds us back for like going for like jobs that we want. It holds you back from like really being the person that you want to be. It holds you back from like having the relationships that you want, or like settling in relationships that are less than ideal, because we have this deep core belief that I'm not enough. And like at the end of the day, there's only really 3 major beliefs that are blocking everyone from getting what they truly want. And like most limiting beliefs, when you boil it down, it comes down to one of those. And the biggest one is like, I'm not enough. The second one is like, what I want isn't available to me. And the third one is I'm different and I can't connect. And I know this kind of sounds weird, because you're like, Kim, like that's not my issue. My issue is XYZ. But once we start really digging into it, it's like, okay, well, when was the first time you felt that way? What was going on then? What was the meaning that you created out of that event? And a big one for people that shows up is like believing that something isn't available to you, because if on a subconscious level you believe that something's not available to you, your mind will go out of its way to try and make sure you don't go and get that thing, because it always wants to conserve energy. Your mind's job is to keep you safe. Your mind's job is to make sure you survive. Your mind doesn't really care if you thrive or not. And a lot of the things that we really want, they contribute to us thriving in life, but your mind perceives it as a threat or a risk. So it goes out of its way to try and conserve your energy, because if you are wasting your energy on tasks that it doesn't believe are possible, then you might not be able to like run away if a tiger came to chase you, because that's how your mind thinks. Like, while we have evolved from like, I guess that like prehistoric brain, that part of the brain is still there, and it still controls a lot of what you do. And the way that this shows up is like a lack of motivation. You're procrastinating. You know that you want to do something, but you somehow find all these reasons not to do it. Or I see it a lot in relationships where people are like, I keep dating like the same shitty person over and over again. Like, why does this keep happening? And then they create the story like, oh, there's just no good people to date wherever I live. And I think it's really funny because like, I speak to people from all over, and everyone has the same story about dating. People will be like, oh, in Vancouver, there's just no one good to date. Oh, in Toronto, there's just no one good to date. Like, insert whatever city it is. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Like, this can't ultimately be true. But from the subconscious beliefs they've created as a child about what they believe about relationships, they just see more and more evidence of this, because on some level, their mind is just trying to keep them safe. So step number 2 for really like deconditioning your limiting beliefs is you have to change your standards around what you'll allow in your life. And like, one thing in life is like really true is like, you get what you allow. And maybe like this is triggering to hear this. A lot of the times people are like, well, I wouldn't choose this. Like, I didn't pick this. This just keeps happening to me. And like, if you want to keep that story, of course, you're always able to keep the story that you want to have. But the thing is if you want to change it, you have to put yourself into that empowered position of being like, okay, this is what's going on. How can I either learn from this? How have I been allowing this? I always say this with like the disclaimer, like, there is certain situations that are outside of your control, like systemic oppression of certain like races or like that kind of thing, or like childhood abuse. That wasn't your fault. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But I'm saying like, as an adult, it can be really easy to be like, this situation is really hard. Why do these people keep doing this to me? Like, I hate my job. My boss is so shitty. And it always comes down like, what's the common denominator in that situation? The common denominator is you. So it's like, you have to be ruthless with what you'll allow in your life if you really want to have like that next level. And while you can't control what other people do at the end of the day, ultimately, you can control what you tolerate. And I always use dating as an example because it's like a really good example of just seeing where people have a lot of beliefs or a lot of like mindsets that allow them to kind of like show up in sort of a disempowered way. And like, I get it because I was there as well, but I changed it and then the whole situation changed. So it's like, I know from firsthand experience that you can change this, and it's up to you to decide like what you will allow in your life. And I know that I use like one of my mentors as an example a lot, in that I guess like he's created a high level of wealth for himself, and he talks about this all the time. He's like, rich people have high standards. He's like, if there's something and I don't like it, I don't have a problem saying like, I don't want to do that, or like, no. And you don't have to be a dick about it. That's the thing. I think a lot of people who we grow up as like people pleasers, or we don't want to rock the boat, or we're like, it felt unsafe for us to speak up for what we wanted. It goes on to create these situations in our adult life where we feel like we just have to tolerate whatever comes our way, and we can't complain about it because we don't want to be seen as negative. But that there's a difference between like saying no to something because you have high standards and then just being like a person who complains about everything. So it definitely feels weird to say no to things in the beginning, and this is something I really struggled with as well. Growing up, it never felt safe to like I never felt like my boundaries were respected. So as an adult, it created a lot of situations where I would just like allow whatever to happen, and I would never say anything because I hate conflict. It's something I'm still working on, and I would always want to avoid conflict. Who's my mentor? Well, he's like a trading mentor. So if you want to learn how to trade like crypto or stocks, that's kind of what I'm learning for him. But you can look up Trade With Me Community on Instagram. This is like such a side note, but I just love him because he like, one, teaches you what to do, but he also is just such an expander for me into like, what does a wealthy person look like? Like, what does that, like, how do they think? How do they talk? And he talks a lot about like psychology and mindset as well. And as you know, like, I'm all about that. So if you're looking for a trading mentor, 100% recommend him. Trade With Me Community on Instagram. But anyways, going back to what we were saying before, I have like, I guess, sort of a recent example where I ended a friendship because it no longer felt aligned. And part of this was due to my own, I fully accept my responsibility in what I did in this relationship as well, but basically I had this friendship where I just had no boundaries. I would allow them to do whatever they wanted to. I would just feel like I always had to say yes. Like, they were constantly late, and that's like a huge pet peeve for me. I never said anything about it. I would never say anything. And over time, that resentment would just build and build and build. And this is what happens when you don't say no to something or you don't speak up for your boundaries, is resentment builds in those relationships. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you're just like, I can't deal with this anymore. If you're the kind of person that is argumentative, maybe you'll get into a fight. If you're like me and you're very conflict avoidant, you usually just try and like avoid the situation, which is not ideal either. And I had to learn that there's like, you're allowed to speak up for what you want, and if that other person can't deliver it, it's okay for you to say no and walk away. And this isn't just true in like friendships or relationships, like this is true in everything, and we always get the standard of what we'll accept. So going back to the dating example, it's like, if you are saying that there's no one out there that's good for you to date, but you keep dating people who show you the same red flags, you don't really like get to know them well, like, and then they start, like, you ignore all those red flags and you continue with the relationship, well, it kind of becomes like you're allowing that. Like, if someone, say, is constantly late, or they're rude to you, or they're like rude to the waiter, or they just do things that you know that aren't things that you like, but you continue to date them, then you're allowing that standard, and then that's where it kind of falls back on you. And I remember when I first started doing work in this area, like working on my relationships and the people that I was dating, I ran into a friend, and I was just kind of like talking to her because she was kind of like getting into like what dating was like for her, and just was kind of venting. And I was like, yeah, I guess now when I go on dates with people, I'm like, so not to the point where it's out of a place of fear, but I'm really clear about communicating like what I want out of relationships to the person. Like, I like to ask them, like, what are they looking for? Like, what kind of a relationship do they be in? And before, that used to really scare me, but the reason I realized it scared me is because I was scared that they wouldn't want the same thing, and then I would make it mean that, like, that would mean that I wasn't good enough if they didn't want what I wanted. But then when I was able to take a step back, I was like, no, by you communicating what you want, you're able to weed out so much faster the people that aren't what you're looking for, and nobody loses, because neither of you is wrong for wanting what you want. But there's no point in you spending your time with someone who like just wants to fuck around if that's not what you want, or vice versa. So it comes back to being like, you get what you allow, but you also have to be clear on like what your standard is, like what do you want? And that clarity builds on working on your self-worth, because when you have high self-worth, it's easy for you to have high standards because you know you're not missing out on anything by having those standards. I think this is the thing that scares people a lot, is they're like, oh, if I have high standards, there won't be any opportunities for me. You get really afraid that you're like, oh, if I say I'll bring it back to like a business example. Like in my photography business, I used to feel like I had to take every single client because I was like, well, if I say no to this client, what if I don't get another one? Then what's going to happen to me? And I would be like, then I'm going to run out of money, and like it would just spiral into this whole thing. But the thing I realized is those clients that ended up not being good clients to work with, I knew straight away the beginning of us emailing each other. I could just tell. Like, I would read the email, I would have a feeling, I was like, I can tell that they're going to be a little bit difficult. I can tell that they're probably not going to want to work the way that like I feel like I work best. But I would say yes anyways, and I would just take the client because I didn't want to miss out on like the opportunity to make money, because I was afraid that like no other clients would come along. And of course, every single time they would be a really difficult client to work with, and I would usually be left being like, well, I would have done a lot better if I hadn't just like, the mental cost of working with this client was not worth the amount of money that I made. So when I started working on my self-worth, working on my mindset, changing my beliefs, then I was able to see that like when you say no to something, you are creating space for the right thing to come into your life. And if you're filling up your time and your space and your energy with all of these things that aren't really what you want, you're communicating to the universe that you don't think you deserve the thing that you actually want. So like no is really the most magnetic word that you can use in every situation, because when you know what you want and you believe and trust that you're worthy of having it, you're able to so easily say no to everything that is not meant for you. And then that's how you start to manifest the things you want into your life, because you actually have energetic space to hold on to them. Like if you're saying yes to dating all these people that aren't the right people, that don't want what you want, you have no space for the right person to come in. So as soon as you can step into having that bravery and letting go of the people that aren't right for you, that's when the right person is able to come in. And you can substitute that with like the right job. As soon as you have the bravery to walk away from a job that you hate, that isn't going anywhere, that's when the right job can come in. When you do it with like clients in your business, that's when the dream clients can come in. So, or even with houses, like I remember when I was looking for houses, I was looking for so many, and so many of them were like not right. And by being able to walk away from those, I was able to manifest a place that I actually did want to live in. So it works for everything. So yeah, just to recap quickly, first step, raise your self-worth. Second step is like raise your standards and say no to everything that is not exactly what you're looking for. And if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, this is the time to experiment. Like, we need clarity to take action, but sometimes it can be hard to have that clarity if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. And in that case, I would say you need to start building experience by going and doing the thing that you want to do. So it's like if you have a business and you're trying to gain clarity around like, what is my niche? Who are the clients that I want to work with? Then you can like go into Facebook groups, see if people will get on market research calls with you, like start taking actions to build clarity around what it is that you want. And the situations that you get where you get something that you don't want are also amazing, because they give you contrast. And then it's able to show you like, okay, I know that this is what I don't want. So next time, if I see that again, I will say no to it, because I know now what I do want. And I guess I sort of like accidentally segued into my third step, which is clarity creates action. And like one of the most frustrating things that happens with my clients is they will avoid setting clear goals because they don't want to be disappointed. And the thing is without like a direction to go in, without something to aim towards, you just end up kind of like faffing around, and you don't have any clarity around what you're supposed to be doing or what your next steps are, because you're not being clear on like what you want to get out of it. And ultimately, like the fear of being disappointed is just holding you back, and will ultimately make you feel far worse, because you'll be sacrificing your dreams for comfort, because you're like, I'm so afraid to feel disappointed for even a moment that I'm more willing to just sit here and not be working towards anything, because at least in this present situation, I know that everything will stay the same. And this is just another example of your mind trying to keep you safe. There's this really funny like story about a man who's like walking down a street, and he sees this dog, and the dog is like sitting there, and the dog is like whimpering, and it's just like crying, and it like looks really unhappy. And the person like looks over, and the dog's owner is like sitting on the porch behind the dog looking at the dog. And then the guy walking down the street is like, are you gonna say are you gonna, your dog is unhappy, like, are you gonna do anything for him? And then the guy sitting on the porch is like, yeah, well, he's sitting on a nail, but he's too scared to get up because he's scared that it will hurt more to get up. And so he keeps sitting there. And I think this is a really good example of what a lot of people do in their lives. They're in a situation that is uncomfortable and is painful, but they're so used to that discomfort and pain of that situation that they don't want to get up and change it, because that feels more scary to them, to get up off the nail and go and do something different. And that's basically what you're doing when you're sacrificing your dreams for like avoiding being disappointed. And if it's something that is really controlling you, like this fear that you're not going to get what you want, like it just points to like the need to work on your self-worth, because like it's like, what do you make that disappointment mean? If you're making that disappointment mean that you not getting what you want means that you're not good enough and you shouldn't have it, that's a story that you've created, and that goes back to your self-worth. Because if we feel worthy of having something, we're not worried about like a little setback. Like the thing is like you have to be willing to fail more than anyone else to get good at what you want to do. And I wish this is something that was talked about more, because people obviously don't publicize their failures mostly, and for the most part, most of us don't talk about the things that didn't work for us. Most of us will talk about the times where it did work, but nobody is going around on Instagram posting all their failures. No one is going around on Instagram posting all the times where they tried to do something and it didn't work. But that's where the growth comes from, because you have to be willing to be bad at something in order to be good at it. And you have to be willing to fail at that thing a lot, because failure is just feedback. And the more things that you realize don't work, you build up a base of knowledge around what does work. And nobody can humans are interesting in that like we don't usually take advice from other people. There can be someone else who has gone out there and done exactly what you want to do, maybe even has a course on it, and they're like, I can tell you what to avoid and like shorten your journey to getting to where you want to go. But a lot of people will be like, no, I'll just figure it out for myself because I don't want to invest the money, or I'm like just dabbling, or I'm afraid that it's not going to work, so I don't want to spend this money on a mentor. And then like they fail at it once maybe, and then they get so scared they decide they never want to do it again, and they just are like, I'm just going to leave it at that. And then they don't end up really going after what they want in life. So you have to be willing to fail more and not make it mean anything about you. Like, I can't tell you like the amount of times, like, obviously you see how my business is now and like the way that it is. And I had a friend who was like thinking of starting a business, and she was just like feeling really overwhelmed with what to do and was like asking for advice. And I was kind of telling her a few things that I thought would be like more important for her to work on, like, than what she was actually focusing on. And she was just like, oh, but like your brand looks so good, your website looks so good, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, but like, don't forget that I've been running a business probably for like, since I was 18, not this business, but some kind of a business. Like first my photography business, and then things evolved over time. But I'm like, the way that you see how it is now, it took me like, gosh, I don't even know. I can't do the math in my head. I'm like, that's like over 12 years of experience doing these things. Online platforms, like payment processors, Instagram, photos, like branding. That's over 12 years of experience. It did not look like this in the beginning. And I think that's the thing that trips people up a lot, is they're like, oh, well, I can't do it to that standard right now, so I don't want to do it at all. And I'm like, the thing that makes people great is like how many times they're willing to fall down and fail at it, but then they get up and keep going. And like the people who are successful are not the ones who never made a mistake. The people who are successful are the ones who just keep going and don't give up. And that's the only difference. But if your belief system is so stuck on like, I don't want to fail, I care so much what other people think of me, I don't want people to not like what I'm doing, then you're never going to get to that place that you want to be, because you'll be so stuck in inaction that you're not actually going to like take action on what you really need to do to move the needle forwards. So back to the 30-second test I was talking about before. Ooh, my chair is rolling. So before, I was telling you guys about a 30-second intuition test that I use for if you want to decide on how to take action really quickly, and if you have like an idea of something that you kind of want to do and you want to see if it's the right thing for you. So, I mean, we can do this right now. So I'll just give you a moment to think of something that you've been trying to decide between two things to action on. And it has to be something that you can answer with a yes or a no. So I'm just going to take a sip of water, and I'll give you a second to think of a question. And then, so we'll just try it on a couple things that are like not your question first, so that you can see how it works. And then we'll do it for your question. So the first thing is like, just take a couple deep breaths. And I just want you to focus your energy inward, and just focus that energy inward towards where you usually hear your intuition from. And for most people, it will be between like either your heart space or your gut. So just focusing on that spot. And if you're not sure, it doesn't matter. Just focus your energy inward. And so just want you to get like your left and right hand and just like put them on your knees, or like put them like beside you or something. And I want you to think of a question that can be answered with a yes or no. So let's just do your name. So I want you to just think in your head, like you would insert your name. I'm going to use mine. So it would be like, okay, I'd be like, is my name Kim? And then I would feel like, what side of my body do I feel that on? And so it should be like, on the left side is yes, and the right side is no. So when you ask, is my name your name, you should kind of feel some sort of energy moving through your left hand or the left side of your body. And if you're really new to this kind of thing, or you don't have like a strong connection with your intuition, I want you to just kind of be present and see what kind of sensations you feel. So we'll just do it again, just so you can like do it without me like talking over you. And you'll just be like, is my name Kim? And then I want you to ask, like, is today Tuesday? And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're going to get a no, because in Australia, it's Tuesday for us. So you can sort of see how this feels. Like, you can calibrate your body and be like, this is what yes feels like, this is what no feels like. And that will give you an answer that's like perfect for you and is the right answer for you. And so this is a really good way of just like cutting through the bullshit, cutting through other people's opinions, and just getting an answer that is like the right answer for you about what you need to do, if something is right for you, if you should eat this food, if you should date this person, if you should do this right now. So this is a really powerful way just to get connected to your own guidance, so you're not looking for guidance outside of yourself, because the best answers are always found within you. So now we can just go and ask your question that like was personalized to you, and obviously you don't have to tell me what it is. We'll just go ahead and I'll just give you a moment so you can just like ask yourself and like feel into like, is it a yes or a no? And if you aren't really getting anything, I would encourage you to practice recalibrating with questions that you already know the answer to, so you can feel what it feels like in your body. And the more you do this, the easier it will be for you to tell. Like I do this all the time with like everything, and so it's really easy for me to check in really quickly and be like, okay, is this a yes or no? But the more you do this, the more you build up that connection, the easier this is going to be for you. So as I said before, this is part 2 of 3 of a 3-part training, and I'm going to be doing the final training this Friday in Australia, so it's Thursday if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm going to try and do 9 a.m. as long as there's no construction this time. And in part 3, I'm going to break down my 4-part manifestation framework that has allowed me to basically manifest everything that I've created in my life. So you can start using these mindset shifts, and of course, if you have any if you haven't, oh my God. At the end of these things, it's always really hard for me to talk. If you have any questions, please send me a DM, reach out. I would love to chat with you. I would love to hear from you. So that's it from me for today. But thank you for joining me. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will talk to you soon.